Yeah, this is a great segue into our next session, which will be interactions between autonomous trucks and first responders. So it definitely is a good lead in to this particular conversation. And we did hear from Gary yesterday, but I'd like to go ahead and reintroduce him this morning. Gary McCarthy is the head of first responder policy at Aurora Tech, and he brings more than 25 years of experience in law enforcement with the state of Arizona. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Gary. And once Gary says a few remarks here on this particular topic, then he'll also invite Bart back up to give some comments as well.
Morning, everybody. So first responder interaction. When I got into this role in 2020, my boss asked me, what's your goal? Because I was the first one to do this. What do you need? What does first responders need to know? And here's what I told him. Law enforcement, public safety is the last to know what's going on. We have no input. It's going to impact resources and staffing. And we're not going to have any buy-in from public safety. So my approach was a two-pronged approach. I'm going to start at the ground level with boots on the ground, talking to officers, troopers, paramedics, and firefighters across the country, and I'm going to go to the executives and talk to them as well. And in the middle, we'll come together. But knowledge is power. And no one knew about autonomous vehicles. My boss came to me before I retired and says, I want to send you to Bend, Oregon, and I want you to learn about autonomous trucks. And I said, I don't really want to do that. He goes, you don't understand how orders work. So I went to Bend, Oregon, and had a great trip. But the thing for me, when I first was in the truck that was AV, or on the test track, I was able to see firsthand, this is going to make a difference. We're going to move that needle on serious injury, fatal collisions. And it just resonated with me from the get-go. So it started in 2020 when I got hired with my first AV company, and I started talking to first responders across the country. And one of the first places I came to was North Dakota to talk to John Sova. One, he was with CVSA, he's an instructor. He was doing all the things with EIM and the industry, and I needed to have more knowledge. And the one thing about, I don't know everything, but I need to know the people that do. I need to talk to the experts and get to know that. So I talked to John, and I started moving across the country. And what I found is first responders were hungry for information. They were hungry to learn about what's going on, and they created buy-in pretty quickly. But then the police executives and the fire executives were just as hungry. This is all new, something we've never done in our careers. And one thing that resonated with me when I was in Florida with Colonel Spaulding is he's like, Gary, in our entire career, we've never been the first to do anything or be a part of something that's never been done before. So again, that really started that. And then when Bart and I started working together in Texas, we built this together, moved forward together, and started training. We just went driver out in April of this year. I've been boots on the ground talking to first responders across the country for 5 years, letting them know what's coming, what to expect, how to interact, partnering, collaborating with Ohio State Patrol, Frisco Fire Department, Police Department, Texas DPS, Arizona DPS, Arizona Enforcement Compliance Division. And names go on and on and on. But the one thing that I've learned from this is you start together, you collaborate together. You can't work in silos anymore. The way we've always done it doesn't work. You got to work together, and you got to build something from the ground up. And that's exactly what we were able to do over the last 5 years. And just the partnerships and collaboration and the friendships that we've built in 5 years, that's really put the cherry on top. For us at Aurora, we worked with Ohio State Patrol to test and vet our system, how your officers are going to interact roadside, how we set up traffic incident management, the phone system, when you call in 1-800 number on the side. All those things were tested and vetted years in advance. So all these things that you're seeing today that we're highlighting, that John showed our truck with the trooper standing next to our truck, that's been over 5 years. So as long as we keep building that and having conversations and being transparent with what we're doing, that's what's guiding us through our true north for public safety and making a difference on the roadway. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, that really it's hat in hand going out there and talking to first responders and the public about what we're doing and what we can do to make it better. And there's one other thing that I've learned since I retired. Once you retire, you're kind of not in the game anymore. You don't know what current trends you're seeing. And those first responders out there doing it day in and day out give me great intel, give me great information. For example, the Border Patrol. Border Patrol and we have great partnerships, with, like I mentioned yesterday, with Sierra Blanca and Las Cruces checkpoints. They smuggle. They're out there for what their mission. But guns, drugs, people, and money are getting smuggled. There's hiding spots that they're using. There's people that are trying to use our equipment or will try to use our equipment for criminal acts. That partnership and learning that intel from them. Hey, people are hiding up on top of the sleeper berth. Look up there when you're doing your inspections. Just certain things like that we would never know. So again, having that open dialogue and having that conversation minimizes those gaps we're seeing, and it just makes a better product all the way around. So I just wanted to highlight that, and we'll get into some questions. But Bart, why don't you come back up and let's have some more talks about first responder interactions.
Thanks. And again, just real quick, Gary covered a lot of good points there. You look across the industry, you look across the developer landscape for AV trucking, and it's not just me and Gary out here. Kodiak has hired retired California Highway Patrol chief. Torque has hired a retired Virginia Highway Patrolman. Gaddick has hired another retired captain from California Highway Patrol. We take this seriously. There's nothing more important to us than making sure that our first responders are safe operating. We want to be part of the solution. You don't have to go very many days to see a first responder, a police officer, a firefighter, even somebody getting hit by a vehicle driving through an emergency scene, right? Or just not moving over or slowing down. We want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that's so important to us, and we're out there working every day. But the other part of it is not only do we want to believe that we're making our first responders safer, but we want them to believe that, and we want them to have confidence in our product. We want them to have faith that we're doing the right thing. Gary mentioned transparency. Going back to my previous role, I'm kind of in a unique situation where I have just stepped out of my previous role. I've been with Bart for 10 months now. Like I said, and in my previous role, I caught all of the commercial vehicle enforcement, and particularly the autonomous vehicle questions, and conversations. And daily I would get calls from Gary, from Brett Fabry at Kodiak, from Richard Russell at Torque, from Clint over at Gaddick. Those guys would call me and say, hey, we're going to do this, or hey, this happened, we want you to know this is the circumstances. And so now I continue that in my role at Bart. If we're involved in a minor incident, I pick up the phone and I call my friends at Texas Highway Patrol, at Texas Department of Motor Vehicles, the local fire departments, first responders. And it's really, as Gary said, it's a grassroots kind of thing. I always said when I was still wearing the uniform and the badge that we don't want the first time a first responder interacts with an autonomous vehicle. The first time they see an autonomous vehicle shouldn't be when they're dealing with an incident scene, whether that be a crash or whatever, right? We need to bring them out. We need to get to them. We need to educate and have those conversations with them before they need that information, right? Experience is that thing that you get right after you need it, right? You've heard that experience. We don't want that to be the case in first responder interactions with autonomy. We want them to experience it. So we're out all the time as a group and as individual companies hosting, the city of Austin coined the term petting zoos, where, first responders can come in and touch and see and talk to us and see how our technology works. When I first started talking about autonomy as still with the Highway Patrol, your first response as a first responder is, you're going to do what? You're going to take the driver out of an 80,000-pound truck? That just doesn't really make sense, right? Our first reaction is normally bad. But as Gary said, if we can get the first responders into our trucks to see the technology, and we point out that 95% of traffic collisions are caused by human error, and then we show them what our trucks are doing, how friendly our trucks are driving, how safe our trucks are operating. show them what our trucks see. When they can see what our trucks see, we quickly get that buy-in and that adoption from our first responder friends. I'm just going to shout out. I brought a few. You know, we've gone to if you go onto any of our websites, any of the developers, you're going to find a first responder interaction plan or first responder interaction guide. That's true of Bot Auto, but I've also had some printed up, and I dropped some off with some of the first responders on my way up to the stage here so that they could look at them. And if anybody, I got a few more when we're done. If anybody wants them, it's a good just little primer on AV, talks about operational design domain, talks about minimal risk condition, the things that we talk about that if you have some questions about, I'd be glad to, like I said, there's a few more of these here if anybody wants them. If not, it's on our website. Even if you're not a first responder, like I said, there's some good information in there. But with that, again, this is important. This is the crux of what Gary and I do for a living these days. We believe in it, and we want to hear your questions and your comments.
Okay. Thank you. We're open for questions.
So, in a bad crash that damages the ADS functionality, how do first responders or safety personnel interact with that truck?
Are you talking about? Check. So you talk about like a traffic stop scenario?
No, like a bad crash. If maybe it's not a fault of the ADS, right? But another human causes a severe crash and the ADS no longer works. There's no information able to be gleaned from it. How does a first responder interact with the truck to know what happened in that situation?
So first of all, when that incident occurs, our command center is automatically made aware that it happens right away. We know, and the camera system's already running, correct? So the great thing about our system, right, wrong, or indifferent, we know exactly what happened. It's like I mentioned yesterday, it's like an armed robbery camera. So what we've done is we've gone through and worked with law enforcement across the country to include Florida, Arizona, just getting what they're going to need for serious injury, fatal collision investigation. So what they're going to have to do is we're going to send a representative to the scene to be part of that. We know as an investigator for 10 years of doing that, what they're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to help them with that investigation on scene itself, but also on our trucks. One run equals about 13 terabytes of data. There's not one agency that has that room on their database to pull that kind of data. So we know we're going to have to work with legal. They're going to have to draw a search warrant to get that information, to get all the data from the vehicles themselves. And then what we'll do is we'll pull copies for that information they're looking for, but also how they interact with us on the scene and what they're looking for if they need to tow that vehicle to do another inspection, to move it to another location. We're going to help them work that investigation just like they do day in and day out. There's going to be no difference. The only difference is they're going to have a camera system and all the evidence to go along with it. We've had a couple incidents where I've talked to Bart about when we've been hit. I was able to go back and actually show him video of what occurred. So the thing with us is just building the information and getting it ahead of time. For example, with the search warrants. Across the country, the search warrants are very standardized, but there are certain nuances to each state. What can we do to meet those thresholds in each state and get that data to them quickly and efficiently? And how long is that vehicle going to be put in? For example, if they're going to impound it for the investigation, how long that vehicle is going to be in impound? The conversations you're talking about and having those conversations or a template to move forward is the key to success when a critical incident does occur. But we have a whole template, a whole lesson or a format to go forward with law enforcement, make sure they get what they need, and to be active partners in that investigation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think ultimately I like to tell people that we feel like autonomy, the sensor suites are going to kind of revolutionize, crash reconstruction because of all the data, right? I mean, not only do we have the cameras, but we have the LiDARs, we have 3D radars. We're going to be able to speeds, trajectories, angles of everything we're gonna be able to provide. And again, there's legal requirements there, and as you look through our guide or their guide, and we have these conversations in advance of these things happening. Yeah, there's things that we ask first responders to do. We ask first responders not to try to recover data from our system. If they have the legal authority or the or a warrant, however they get it, to download the data recorder on the vehicle, that's one thing. But we ask them, if possible and can be safely done, to follow specific shutdown procedures for our trucks, to not try to recover data from our proprietary systems. We'll come out. We want you to have the data, whether, again, good, bad, or indifferent. We want you to have the data, but there is the potential that that you will be that you could corrupt or destroy data if it's done improperly. But one of the biggest things when you talk about interacting, John had a good picture up there. One of the biggest things that first responders want to know when they're approaching a autonomous vehicle is it going to move? Is it going to drive off? And if you followed some of the robo-taxi debacles in San Francisco, as some of the companies rolled out up there over the last 3 or 4 years, you would have cars moving and doing things that were unexpected for law enforcement. John had a great picture of the bought auto truck, and if you look at our first responder guide, there's a picture in there. Man, when I was still with the patrol, that was the biggest thing. One of the biggest questions is, how do we know it's safe? And different companies are approaching this in different ways. We put a light on the outside. If the light's on, the autonomy is engaged. If the light's off, the autonomy is disengaged. It's safe to approach. As Gary talked about, if the light's on and you need it off, call us. We will kill the autonomy so that you can safely approach it. We're very just extremely concerned that our first responders feel comfortable operating around our trucks.
And add to that, our command center, when that something occurs, an incident occurs, our command center is trained too. We partner with Texas DPS to get information they need from their dispatch center of what they're looking for. And us as first responders, we want to know how many vehicles are involved, how many patients are involved, what's the injury level. That way we can dispatch let public safety know how many units they're going to need to dispatch. And what our call takers do is when we have an incident, and our playbook says, let them know where it occurred at, milepost, direction of travel, how many vehicles, how many patients are involved. That way the highway patrol or the agency we're dealing with knows exactly what they're going into. If it's a mass casualty event, a bigger vehicle, say a van, they know they're going to need more than one fire truck and an ambulance out there. So we want to be proactive when an incident does occur, that we get the first responders out to it, because we know that golden hour is so important for critically injured, right? So if we can expedite that and save some time there, that's going to save lives. So we're proactive on letting public safety know what they need and what to expect when they get on scene.
So I have a question about near-miss data. In the world of kind of safe traffic safety and traffic planning, understanding dangerous roadways or areas that are more potentially dangerous is always like a kind of unicorn data. Do you have any way, or have you guys given any thought to ways of collecting or analyzing near-miss data to be able to provide, opportunities for improving whatever stretch or aspect of traffic is causing kind of near misses?
I mean, the short answer is yes, but the longer answer is that's a work in progress, and it's going to be a work in progress. We talk with our DOTs particularly. How can we do that? How can we help provide data that will to improve traffic conditions, but not only traffic conditions, but road conditions. There's a pothole on Interstate 10 at milepost 275. Can we report that? And so we're working on those things, and part of it is it's just how do we get that? Gary talked about a single run being 13 terabytes of data. How do we sift through that data? Obviously, we live in an AI world now. There are ways, right? But how do we sift through that and get usable data? And then how do we get it to our DOTs or to the appropriate agency in a usable way? And then we get into the privacy issues. If we are out there collecting a lot of data, which is going to include other license plates and other potential personal type information. So we get into that personal privacy kind of realm. It has been a little bit of a stoppage for us there, or at least something we have to work through. But the answer is yes. We would love to get to the point where we have a system where we can not only make traffic systems but also infrastructure, better using our technology.
And I've been approached by Texas A&M on a couple different occasions about lane lines. How can are these working better? Can you see these better at night than, if you can see them on a camera, as a driver seeing them better? When it rains and it washes out the lane lines and it's hard to see, what makes it better? Bart mentioned potholes, but also for us, those edge cases you're talking about, low light conditions with our LiDAR system, being able to see further down the road because of the LiDAR, taking that back into simulation and building that over and over again in those locations, and also letting jurisdictions know, hey, the light's pretty low in this area, it's hard to see. Maybe you can come in and change the lights. And I think it goes back to that partnership, right? If we can be early warning indicators about road degradation or lane lines or lighting, that's going to help all the way around. And it's over the years, people have found what we're doing, and now the conversations are starting in a different way that when I first started, we weren't having these conversations. So now it's more of a holistic approach to roadway safety to include the roadway, the terrain, the lighting, and plus what the vehicle is seeing day in and day out.
And Gary brings up a good point. Several years ago, the conversation revolved around, when we would talk to TxDOT, would be, do we need 6-inch lane lines instead of 4-inch lane lines, and what level of reflectivity do we need on that and on our traffic signs? And ultimately, we still have those conversations, but we don't feel like we need special consideration from our DOTs to operate safely. But ultimately, I think to Gary's point is, if it's good for autonomy, it's good for human drivers. If our autonomous systems can see those lane lines better, can see those signs better, if the lighting is more advantageous to our systems, then that's going to make it safer for human drivers as well. And if we can provide that data and help improve the system, again, I talked in the previous session about ways that I believe autonomy is lifting up the entire ecosystem. And I think this is another way where we can help do that.
That's great. Thanks.
Good morning. I had some questions about the orange safety triangle that drivers are supposed to deploy when they pull over to the side of the road. I know at one point Aurora filed for an exemption to that rule, and I think that was denied. How do you guys operate with a driverless vehicle when you have to pull over to the side of the road and there is no driver to deploy that orange safety triangle? Is that just something you guys, I recognize it's kind of a silly rule, is that something you guys ignore, or do you guys still have a procedure for alerting first responders and whoever's at that vehicle that you are pulled over?
No, we don't ignore it. We follow the rules. So what we do with our strategy right now is we deploy our vehicles in succession to where if we have an issue, we have a safety driver and we have rescue teams out there as well that we're going to respond and get there before that 10-minute mark to make sure that we're there out deploying the triangles, what we see. Now we know there's technology coming that's going to make that better, and the one thing I was talking to some of the people here about the warning triangles. One, I've never seen that ticket written in my career, just never seen it. Two, the only person in the planet that has to get out of their car and put triangles down, if there's a bad snowstorm or a dust storm that occurs, stay in your car, pull off the shoulder, keep your seatbelt on, turn your lights off, except if you're a professional driver. Then get out of the truck and put these warning triangles out to let people know you're stopped. It kind of it's counterintuitive. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we trained our rescue team. And our rescue team, we know there's going to be issues on the side of the road that are going to go out and deploy these. But we also work with North Texas Toll Authority and Traffic Incident Management to make them more effective. We even shadowed North Texas Toll Authority personnel, roadside personnel, to train our employees on how to properly park, position, move, advance on the vehicle, their safety gear that they wear roadside. So when we talk about the safety level and adhering to the rules, we do that above and beyond. But we want to make sure our employees are safe when they go do that. And I think what we find as technology advances and we find a solution for the warning triangles, but in the meantime, we're following the rules and we're doing exactly what motorist assist do across the country, to include Arizona, and all the major highway patrols have a motorist assist program. We're doing exactly the same thing for our own vehicles, and we call it a rescue team.
And we did the same thing. I mean, it's kind of breaking news. Again, I'll reference our good friend Richard Bishop. One of the things that Richard does is writes articles for Forbes, and he wrote an article that was published this morning about Bart Auto, and we actually did a humanless demonstration recently on Interstate 10. And to Gary's point, I was just off the bumper. Well, I was within sight of that vehicle with an extra set of warning triangles and a CDL driver and all kinds of contingency plans if something happened that we had to abort that driverless mission. So we're keenly aware, and no, we will never just operate in ignoring any particular regulation. And so we're just very hopeful right now that with the current administration and the mood at FMCSA that we have an opportunity to probably to move forward on that warning triangle issue, and again lead forward for the industry. If we're developing solutions that are of equivalent or better safety to those old warning triangles, and we don't have to have drivers get out in traffic in dangerous conditions, then again, we feel like that's another example of autonomy leading the entire industry forward. And we look forward to hopefully seeing some resolution of that by the end of the year or next year at the latest, because it is a little bit of a hindrance to us to scale and operate over long distances if we have to account for that.
Great, thank you.
Real quick, I'm smiling because I just started in the tech world and we're talking about the warning triangles. This is 2020. And I'm listening to all these engineers talking about what we're going to do. They had remote control cars. They're going to shoot out the back of the truck and deploy the triangles. And I came up with an idea. I'm like, well, why don't we just put a drone in a sleeper berth with chargeable warning triangles, and it can deploy it from the top of the sleeper berth and deploy it properly, like per regs. And I'm kind of being a smart aleck about the whole situation. And a kid that drank a lot of Tang as a kid and MIT grad, he goes, hey, I think we could do that. And I just stopped being a smart aleck at that time and realized I'm dealing with a whole other group of people. But when you talk about trying to problem solve this, there's people coming out with some great ideas about the warning triangles and just safety in general. It's pretty astonishing. And seeing the industry change in the last 5 years from where we started in March of 20 when I started to right now, it doesn't even look like the same industry. It's incredible how much the tech changes.
I guess a question on preventing crashes. So we see a lot of failure to stop at stop signs, entering an intersection, getting T-boned, causing a fatality. How well do these things see to the side? You mentioned your LiDAR, and I would think more focused on downstream vision, like when you don't have gaps at a busy, let's say 4-lane divided non-interstate roadway.
Well, actually, I don't know if I showed a couple videos yesterday of a T intersection in the Houston area where we had a red light runner. Our light turned green. We're going to make a left-hand turn, and the truck can see down the roadway far enough in advance and to know that the vehicle wasn't going to stop and just held on the green light, even though we had the green. It just stopped. So the 360 awareness, and when we worked with Frisco Fire, there was several intersections we worked with that were, when we were doing the emergency vehicle interaction, that we were picking up the emergency vehicle 150 to 300 feet east and west of the intersections, approaching the intersection. So the lateral part of that, it just depends on how many trees and overhangs, typical for drivers too. But for stop signs on our route that we show for our demo, there's 2 4-way stops that we utilize for the demo route. People can't navigate four-way stops very well anyway, but our trucks do it, and they can tell when people are going to stop. The perception reaction is so fast, they can still see that the tires are still moving, even very slow, so it just holds. And when we get people come back from the demo ride, they're shocked to see what interaction they had with the vehicles at those intersections, but also it reacted so quickly to it. And John Sova was actually in the truck on his demo ride when a car ran a stop sign in front of us, and John didn't realize it stopped so fast, and then the car moved through the intersection. So the lateral perception is really well, it does very well. The one thing about the perception I'll actually flag for you, we had a motorcyclist pass us at 150 miles an hour, and we had a hard time picking it up. Our CEO goes, we need to make that happen. We need to be able to pick that up. So we actually hired a rider to come out to TRC, Ohio, and go by our vehicle at speeds well over 150 miles an hour so we could gain that data so we have in our system. Because people do things, like you said, these one-off scenarios, but we want to make sure that the lateral, what we're picking up perception-wise, cross-traffic, and from the lateral four-way stops or intersections are critical to the success of the vehicle.
Yeah, so I wish I could take credit for what I'm about to say, but it came out. Our CTO at Bart said this within the last week in a blog post. Human drivers react, automated driving systems anticipate. And so we talk about reacting. Yeah, we react, but we're anticipating. I like to tell people that the crashes we're going to prevent with the scaling of autonomy aren't just the crashes that would be caused by our trucks if they were human operated. We know that happens a lot. In Texas, we have a severe commercial vehicle crash problem. We're not just going to prevent those crashes. We're going to prevent the crashes that are caused by the other person running the stop sign or the other person failing to yield right away. This is going to be a game changer because we don't react, we anticipate. And I can't wait till it gets here. That's why I'm in this business. Texas, we haven't had a day in Texas since November of 2000. So coming up on 25 years that we haven't had at least one traffic fatality on Texas highways. Man, I want to be around for that first day, right? That next day when nobody dies on a Texas highway. And I think autonomy is going to be a part of that, and I can't wait to get there.
In that same vein, then, what's being done to prevent truck-assisted suicides?
For the move over, we're having a conversation with the engineers about the move over laws. And it's very black and white. Arizona, you move over. Texas, you move over and slow down by 20. So each state has their own nuance to that, and we adhere to all those rules. But as we're working through those conversations, we're like, well, why do we have to move over for a car in the shoulder? Like, well, it's just a good practice, and if someone's changing a tire, falls into traffic, if something happens that somebody ends up in the roadway, and I mentioned, what if someone's trying to commit suicide and run in front of the truck? And one of the engineers goes, I never thought of that. And I said, why would you? You've never been a part of this world. So I think the combination of experience that Bart and I bring to the engineering team and to show real world implication of what can occur, we move over to create that gap, to create that distance so we can eliminate some of that. But again, we can only control a certain amount of that. There's still time distance that applies to that. But if we move over well in advance, at least we're not the ones that are going to be, we're doing the right thing day in and day out. And that's a great point. And the engineering team really took a lot of value out of that, because now we're having conversation that engineers don't have about public safety and what we see over our career. But now how do we anticipate that and try to avoid some of those as well? And I think that's a great question. And there's things you see on the roadway that you just can't predict. Or every time in my career I said, well, I think I've seen it all. Well, guess what? Something's going to change and I'm going to see something new. I'm like, well, I was wrong. So I quit saying that because I got tired of saying new things. But I really appreciate that question. I think that's something that I think we do a really good job at anticipating that and trying to avoid that by the way we build our system.
Yeah, and I would love to sit up here and tell you that I envision a future where there are zero traffic fatalities or zero crashes or zero incidents. But the unfortunate truth is, for all the promise of autonomous vehicles, I don't think we're going to eliminate those things. And, we can, again, anticipate potentially that suicide by truck and mitigate the circumstances. But if we miss them, if they're dedicated enough, they're just going to find the one behind us and go do it again, right? So, that's going to continue to be a problem.
Thanks, Gary and Bart, for that great information you've shared. Just a quick question that I've received a few times from law enforcement, going back to if they did happen to notice like an imminent hazard type violation. I mean, do they even need to know that it's an autonomous vehicle to pull over that vehicle, or how does that interaction work? Like, how would they go about pulling over that vehicle?
Well, I mean, I think again, like you look at different developers doing different things to communicate that they are autonomous vehicles and they're operating in autonomy. And right, we try to educate our first responders, particularly in the areas that we're working in, how to determine that. I mean, autonomous vehicles are by and large pretty distinctive with the sensor array and stuff, but there is the potential that for some reason, it's nighttime, a trooper or a deputy or a police officer passes our truck opposite direction, notices in the rearview mirror that we have a light out. Hey, I want to stop and take it. Didn't pick up that it was autonomous. The answer is no. They don't need to know that they're going to pull up behind it. They're going to turn on the lights. They're going to turn on siren, whatever their protocol is. And our truck is going to pull to the side. Our trucks are going to pull to the side of the road and stop in a safe location. Now's where the fun part starts, right? Now how do you caught it, now you got to clean it, right? And that again is why we spend a lot of time out there trying to educate our first responders prior to them doing that, so they'll know how to respond to our trucks. They'll know how to get a hold of some backroom assistants that can walk them through anything they need to know. They'll know where to find pertinent documents, registration, insurance, bills of lading, those types of things that might be needed on either a routine traffic stop or a roadside inspection, whatever. So we want to make it as seamless as possible, but even if they don't know when they flip around and turn on the lights that it's an autonomous vehicle, our trucks are going to act like a human-driven truck and pull over safely, and then we'll figure out the rest.
We want the officers and the troopers to do exactly what they're trained to do day in and day out. If there's an imminent hazard, of course, to pull it over and take the action you need, but we'll work you through that. And I think it goes back to those 5 years what we're talking about is priming those routes, those operational design domains, or those officers so they know exactly how they interact with the vehicle. We're going to actually produce a card that the officers can keep, because you know how that goes. You go through training, and then 6 months later, you end up interacting with it. That way they have a cheat sheet, a way to go by to interact with it. But everything follows Tim's. When they make the right side approach, they'll see the 1-800 number. They'll see where the document box is. And not to poke fun at motors, but we made it kind of motorcycle officer proof that they can actually get through this traffic stop correctly. And the 1-800 number will help them. If we need to, we'll get a representative out there to assist.
And I think one of our next frontiers in this space is probably figuring out instead of us going off one off, and we're working very hard to get out there and like I said, cold call or make friends at all the agencies within our operational design domains. How do we get this kind of training, some kind of autonomous vehicle training included in, say, basic peace officer courses within our various states, where as an officer goes through the academy, this is we're moving well into the 21st century. This is a reality. Autonomy is there. This needs to be something that is trained as you are becoming a peace officer, as you're becoming a firefighter, as you're becoming an emergency medical technician or paramedic. This needs to be included in those basic certification schools of how to deal with, at least on a basic level, how to deal with autonomous vehicles. So, that's something, that as we continue to push forward, we will continue to work. TxDOT, we're working with TxDOT and some of the other folks. Gary has some information on that.
So Traffic Incident Management, the Texas DOT team, we met a couple weeks ago. They want to build a section in Tim's training for AVs. And now, once they build it in Texas, they want to submit that to the national level. So that's another way that we'll have training for first responders, DOT personnel, and tow truck operators on how to interact with autonomous vehicles. We're looking for places where via AMVA, FMCSA, where it's web-based, where anybody can look at this video at any time and have the training and have the knowledge, at least have a link to go to. Because Bart and I, there's two of us for two companies going across the whole country. It's kind of hard to hit every law enforcement agency, but what we can do is we can expedite that and make it more efficient by doing online training and helping them get the knowledge they need to successfully interact with these vehicles.
Now that autonomy is here and it'll soon become normal, in the future, imagine that it would be illegal for a human driver to be operating a vehicle. Would we still need law enforcement?
I would say yes, for several reasons. Even if we didn't have human drivers, one of the big questions we get from law enforcement around the country is, when we talk about this limited interaction with law enforcement, will criminal enterprises look to exploit that to, as Gary was talking about earlier, move guns, money, people, and drugs, across the country or across borders? And the answer is, if history tells us anything, that the criminal organizations will look to exploit any vulnerability that we have, right? And so we're always going to have a need for law enforcement, for traffic enforcement, for various reasons. Does the nature of that business change like the nature of a lot of businesses change? Sure, but we're a long way away from considering too big of a paradigm shift there.
Yeah, I would agree that law enforcement is going to be a part of this for my opinion, for the future and ongoing. But I think, like Bart said, it's going to change. All the roles and things change as we progressed. Our technology changes, like John and Bart were talking to, especially with the inspection side and driver credential checks. But also, what can they do those resources for to focus on the bad actors? I know when I was a chief of ADOT's Enforcement Compliance Division, we'd run details all the time, and we had certain hours, and all the drivers knew what certain hours we were open. Well, we'd switch that up, and we'd open at 2 in the morning, and we'd have the bypass routes with our scale team. We're catching trucks at 120, 130,000 pounds with no driver credentials at all on these bypasses. So law enforcement's always going to be a part of it. You're taking one aspect of autonomous vehicles who are running by the numbers, doing it above and beyond and transparent, but there's still going to be bad actors, and it doesn't matter what profession that is, there's still going to be bad actors. So you're going to have accountability for that, and law enforcement is still going to be a critical part of that moving forward.
This goes a little bit beyond just autonomous trucks, but I'm curious y'all's perspective on it. I know autonomy and autonomous systems and automation are kind of impacting law enforcement in a variety of ways, drone first responder programs and automated consumer vehicles and things like that. So I'm just curious, broadly, how do you guys see automated and autonomous systems impacting law enforcement? And I guess, is there a path in several years where all of these become integrated and work together and things like that, where your autonomous trucks and your drone first responder programs and all of that kind of have connection points?
Yeah, I think if we're not, as law enforcement, if we're not continually looking for ways to leverage technology, whether it be autonomous technology, whether it be AI, whether, whatever it is, then we're going to fall behind, because certainly, as I mentioned before, I think the criminal elements out there are going to learn to exploit these things. And it's funny when you talk about how do some of these technologies affect law enforcement. Just a little anecdote. A couple years ago, friends from Maryland, state police there, bought cars that had some ADS equipped features, including a front camera, and then they put a Satina bumper, a pit bumper, so they could do the pit maneuver on the front, and so then they couldn't move their cars because the truck locked it. So some of these advances, particularly in ADAS type stuff, driver assistance, we're going to have to work to develop those into the law enforcement environment, because there are those kinds of considerations that I just mentioned that may not work, right? If we are in a high-speed pursuit, or we are trying to get to an emergency scene, those lane keeping systems, lane departure warnings may be more of an impediment and a hazard than an assistance. So it's going to be an interesting question how we leverage that. But certainly I think that when we talk about AI and building advanced algorithms to help us with crime analysis, traffic analysis, those things, that's where there's going to be real potential for new technologies to certainly influence and improve our law enforcement performance.
Well, back to your drone comment. Having a drone program, I want to say Texas DPS has 700 drone operators certified for their troopers. But you look at the cost of a helicopter and the maintenance of a helicopter, And agencies now are using drones and being just as effective with their drone system, and it doesn't cost them nearly as much. And now they have cameras and eyes in the sky, which is evolving. I had a conversation with a deputy chief in Frisco, and his comment was, I want to put one of these on my fire truck. I want to put some of your equipment on my fire truck. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, could you imagine the 4 firefighters get in the truck to go to respond to the fire or the call, and they don't have to drive. The truck's gonna get them there, and they can get ready, they can get suited up while the response time's gonna be quicker. Medical transports in between medical facilities, depending on how that looks. As we start peeling this onion of all the applications for the AV tech or just tech in general, how that changes things. My dad was a motorcycle officer, crashed and was in a wheelchair. And he and I were talking about autonomous vehicles. He said, hey, I don't trust them. I said, what about when you work serious injury, fatal collisions? Was it driver error? And he kind of laughed. He goes, yeah. He goes, I just never thought of it. I said, Dad, none of us ever thought of this. But he was in a wheelchair and he was getting older. And the thing with him is I said, I don't have to take your license from you because your car knows how to get you to the doctor. It knows how to get you and Mom to Walgreens for your prescriptions. It changes the mobility. And I think people with some disabilities or some impairments, especially like there was a video that they did with Waymo with a person that was blind that now is able to get in a Waymo car and travel around because they have access to it. So I think really when you look at technology, just not from a first responder, but as a society, this is going to change things for the better across the board on things we never anticipated.
Next question. Well, I have just a procedural one. I've looked at your first responder manuals, and Torque Robotics has a great one as well. And I know there are variances in your technology and your ADSs, but is there a thought of maybe having a single manual at some point in the future where all the common stuff is loaded and then the variances in the kind of in an appendix form or something like that?
Yeah, so we've been talking about that for about 1.5 years now. Bart and I have a more standardized, systematic approach so officers and first responders don't have to try to remember every company's way of doing business, and having some standardized things that are across the board consistent. And that's what we're working with those other guys like Bart said, from the other companies. What can we do to make it more standardized and systematic for their approach? And that's something that each company has their nuances. Like you said, the equipment's a little different, things are a little proprietary, but what can we do to manage that and make it more common ground? And we're working through that right now. And we both sit on VIA's Law Enforcement Advisory Board, and we're trying to come up with protocols and procedures to do just what you're talking about. So that's why I smiled when you asked the question. We're working on that as we speak.
Interesting that you asked that question, Denver. I had that conversation yesterday. I was on a call in Texas back when we initially passed our initial enabling statute for AV. The governor's office, this is back in 2017, governor's office directed the state agencies to stand up a connected and automated vehicle task force, and it has existed ever since. It's run by the Texas Department of Transportation. It's kind of the parent agency of it, but it's really, we've produced a number of white papers, and the heavy lifting is done by your friends at Texas Transportation Institute out of Texas A&M. And so we were on a call yesterday as we're now that our legislative session in Texas is over, we're starting a new round of subcommittee meetings within the task force. And so I stepped out for a while yesterday and took yesterday afternoon and took sat in on the call that we had on our safety subcommittee. And this is one of the things we talked about is this a potential work product of our subcommittee and of the task force to kind of take all of these different, like you mentioned, Torques. I love Torques. Mine looks a lot like Torques because I thought it was such a good product. I love what they did over there. And so can we take all of these and either manually or hopefully plug them into ChatGPT or Claude AI, pick your preferred AI driver there and throw them in there and get a product out that covers everything. And so we're talking about that as a potential work output. And so TTI just in the last couple months in Texas did put out a first responder guide where they did a lot of this work. And so we want to build on that. Again, in Texas, because of our friendly regulatory structure and our good weather, I think there are 7 autonomous vehicle truck developers, and they're all operating or have operations in Texas. So we're all there. So it's a great place. And we feel like we've built a great working relationship. That task force that I'm talking about is Texas DOT, Texas DMV, Texas DPS, licensing and regulation department. It's the insurance, commission. It's all those, plus all the developers, plus the university presences, plus anybody that wanted to get involved was welcome to join. And so it's this broad coalition. And so we hope to come up with something, and again, hopefully from Texas, continue to lead, and would love to see the rest of the country, kind of what I like to call the Texas model for deploying AVs in Texas. Man, I think we've done a great job, and we'd love to see the rest of the country follow.
Got time for one more question here.
Gary, I think you mentioned working with Customs and Border Patrol a little bit yesterday. I'm curious, broadly, what your interactions have been with federal law enforcement and what their interest is in autonomous trucks.
So Border Patrol was a unique avenue to go down because most of us don't really work in public safety. We interact with Border Patrol very rarely. My ports of entry in Arizona, we had a Border Patrol area down there. We actually used their training facility, so I had some contacts, and Captain Teeter actually and I went down there and met with Border Patrol in February of 21, and we were telling them what we want to do, and I was telling them my ideas and my goals of working with the checkpoints. And Chief Montalongo, who was at a headquarters, has been on Border Patrol a little over 20 years at that time, said this is the first time in his career that anyone's asked for their input, guidance, or just support. And now we've been in a pilot with them going through the checkpoints for over 3 years. So their interaction with the Border Patrol has been fantastic. The collaboration has been amazing. We've learned a lot from them. Bart was talking about opening up the terminals. His canines, Border Patrol can bring their canines into our terminal in El Paso, do sniffs, do their training there, whatever they want to do. It's an open area for them to do training and just come look at what we do. But it's been nothing but exceptional across the board. I go to DC twice a year, meet with them and meet with other people in DC, but Chief Montalongo and that Border Patrol team has been, I just sent people out there 2 weeks ago just to sit in the agent's booth, so when our trucks come through, how the perception is. They change the height of their booths, so it changes the perception, how we look at it. So now we made some adjustments and we got buy-in from their agents. And the very first time we had a truck go through their checkpoint in Sierra Blanca, the truck's coming into the lane, and there was 15, I got a great picture of about 15 agents all sticking their head around the corner to see it come through. Well, the truck stopped about 100 yards before. And they're like, why did it stop? Because you're in the way. It won't go because and they're like, oh, and they had that kid look and just kind of move back and it moved through. But I can't say enough about the Border Patrol and how willing they were to participate and be a part of it and give us great ideas. So now we've been doing this for 3 years, and like I said, it's been exceptional.
Okay, well, we're at break time, so please join me in giving this great panel a hand. And what a wealth of information. Thank you. Thank you both.